So they are delaying the start to the race because of this issue for Edward Lee. The marshal's just pushing the car out of the way, so you can see the field had pulled out, had formed up in 2x2 there for the rolling start, but they've kept the runyourfleet.com safety car out on track. The time has not yet started, so this is a delayed start rather than a safety car start, essentially. Start hopefully at the end of this lap. So the cars work their way through Redgate Corner, down through the crane of curves. The Ferrari that's on pole was just 0.4 of a second quicker than David Fenn in the Lotus Elise, but of course David in the pit lane not looking set to start. That car's been there a while as well. I noticed it right at the start of the City Car Cup earlier on, so it's been there for a good 20 or so minutes as they try and figure out the problem, and they've just not been able. There's a lot of standing around and talking and not a huge amount of fixing going on, so the Lotus, I'm afraid, is going to be a non-starter. And they have now started the time, so the timing screen does now kick into life. Oh, that's one of the Porsches as well then, by the looks of it. Is that the 9? I've never have been any good at Porsche. That's the 968? 6.8, yes, of James Alexander as opposed to the 964 of Robert Hollyman. I do wish, it's one of the biggest regrets I have about modern motoring, I wish that we would go back to naming cars properly, not just giving them a number, because someone who is numerically challenged as I am, it's often difficult to remember which is a Porsche 964 and which is a 968. But anyway, I'll stop whinging now. Ferrari from Aston Martin, from VW Golf, the top three on the grid. Not many grids in the world where you get that sort of variety at the front of the field. We do still have that one Lotus there, which is the Exige of Peter Jackson. So it'll be interesting to see how he gets on in this one. And a couple of Porsches towards the back. That Porsche GT3 should be a bit further up the order than that, I've said as well. So I think it's going to be a bit of shuffling here in the early stages. Once we get the race underway, we're going to see, I think, a few drivers that maybe didn't quite get the best out of their cars in qualifying moving forward. Peter Jackson, actually, in that red Exige, only did 9 laps in qualifying, whereas most of them did about 14, 15 or 16 laps. So there are definitely a couple that probably didn't get their absolute best pace out of the car earlier on. The safety car then, or the pace car, oh no, it is officially the safety car again now, isn't it? Because the race has started now behind the safety car. Does that mean that we will get a single file restart? Well, some of them are doing it single file and some of them are doing it double file, but I think this should be a single file start with Nigel Jenkins then on the pole position. The red lights, of course, are going to go to green rather than going out, and that's caught him out a bit. And Jamie Sturgis, who's raced in quite a lot of races that have probably started behind the safety car, gets a bit of a jump on the Ferrari, so they're 3 wide almost into the braking zone. It will be the Ferrari of Nigel Jenkins that gets the lead. Jamie Sturgis gives the big squeeze there to the Albert Aston Martin, which gets sideways, almost loses it in front of the rest of the pack, and that allows the top 2 then to make a bit of a break. So what happened there, I think, is that Nigel Jenkins and a couple of others, they were waiting for the red lights to go off, but they wouldn't do that because it wasn't actually the start of the race. They just went from red to green. I think that confused a few people, and yeah, Jamie Sturgis, one of those that was able to take advantage. There goes the Aston Martin DB4 of Edward O'Byrne, a bit further down the order, number 55 BMW of Lawrence Squires behind him now, so that's been a change on the opening half a lap. Field makes its way up through McLean's and Coppice then for the first time. 5th position now for the Lotus Exige of Peter Jackson, so through a mixture of other people having problems and him being on his toes at the start, he's been able to pick up a few places, and there is the Nissan, which Charles Hard Andrew Bird will be driving, I presume, for the opening stint. Charles has been a regular in the Classic Sports Car Club in recent years, and now at the wheel of that magnificent Nissan 2000 SX, which I followed into the circuit this morning, and I did think to myself at the time, ooh, I do hope that's racing in one of the Aston Martin Owners Club races, and here it is, gaining a position actually at the expense of the number 9 Porsche of Robert Hollyman. We've got the other Porsche there trying to come through as well. That's Gary Wardle, isn't it, in the 27. Now, Wardle did not qualify at all earlier on. That, I think, is a 911 GT3 Cup car, isn't it, that number 27? So not a full GT3 car, but certainly not far off GT3 pace, which means in theory it should be the only other car in the race realistically that can challenge the Ferrari of Nigel Jenkins at the front of the field, especially since we don't have David Fenn in the race. Fenn's car, by the way, no longer on the pit apron, so I think they've realised that was a lost cause and they've sent it back into the garage. So Charles Hard Andrew Bird then under pressure now from Gary Wardle. Oh, I'm telling a lie about Gary, sorry, he did qualify. He qualified in 7th position, so a little off the pace maybe that you would expect to see from that car. Goes the number 20 Aston Martin. That's the Can and Wilson Aston Martin V8 Vantage. Ricky Can, and Wilson was not on the original entry list, so I can't tell you his first name, but presumably it is Ricky taking the opening stint of the race. Down the exhibition straight they go then, and we are already seeing a decent margin being built up here by the race leader Nigel Jenkins over Jamie Sturgis in second position. So Jenkins then with the fastest lap, 1:13.961, and Sturgis just can't quite live with that pace, as you'd expect really. A GT3 spec Ferrari versus a TCR spec VW. Those TCR cars are rapid, but they're not GT3 Ferrari pace. Gary Wardle comes through ahead of the Nissan now, so that change has happened, and off, I'm afraid, has gone the DB4 of Edward O'Byrne. That's up at McLean's. That car probably doesn't have a huge amount of grip, it must be said, compared to some of the other cars out on track at the moment, so not surprising that he's finding it a bit of a handful. That means he's giving that place back now to the 55 BMW of Lawrence Squires, 10th place, the position in question. There goes the number 9 Porsche, which is the Robert Hollyman Porsche 964. This is the battle really, isn't it, at the moment? It's the Aston Martin V8 Vantage, the Can & Wilson Vantage, with the Lotus behind and Peter Jackson. Then you've got Gary Wardle in the Porsche, who does seem to have a bit more pace now in the race than he was carrying in qualifying earlier on. And the Bird Nissan not far behind them either. Running in slightly different classes we have. So we have a GT3 class, we have an open class, which is somehow different to an invitation class, don't ask me how, and then there's classes D and E as well, and in fact there's even a Class B car. Lawrence Squires in that BMW 318 that's moved into 10th place is a Class B car. Gary Wardle there, who is a GT3 spec, or GT3 class car, moves ahead of the Lotus of Peter Jackson, running in the Invitational class, and in fact Peter's going to lose another place now because the Nissan dives up the inside too, a bit more horsepower there for the Nissan, and it goes ahead of the Lotus that was outperforming the pace certainly that we saw from it in qualifying. In qualifying, Peter Jackson did a 1:17.681, which was only good enough for 9th on the grid, whereas Jackson's previous lap, well, it was his best lap in this race, is a 19.0, not quite down on his qualifying pace. But look at this, he's getting racy, isn't he? Back up the inside of Bird now in the Nissan, and reclaims the position down at the old hairpin. Run back through Starkeys again, all of them getting really caught up behind the Aston Martin, the Can & Wilson Aston Martin, which has plenty of grunt, so it sort of gets away from them all in a straight line, and then as soon as they get to a twiddly bit, they all sort of get stacked up behind it. But it's quite a big car, the Aston Martin, so relatively easy to defend in it. It fills a lot of the road. The little Lotus perhaps the one that's most likely to be able to get through because it's very small, it's very agile, and you can see there Peter Jackson really using all of the mid-corner speed to get onto the tail of Gary Wardle, but then as soon as they get on the straight, Bird in the Nissan is able to get alongside him again. So the Aston Martin turns into the chicane. Porsche next, Nissan next. So just as we saw a lap ago, the Nissan goes through on the exhibition straight. Peter Jackson tries to fight back coming off the chicane, but he's going to lose out every time in a horsepower battle across the start-finish line. So they go through then onto their 6th lap of the race. This, I remind you, is the fight for 4th, 5th, 6th and 7th. 2 of them are actually in the same class, it's worth pointing out. The Can & Wilson Aston Martin is in the same class as the Bird Nissan. So if those two ever get themselves together, that is a fight for the Class D lead. This is a fight for 2nd place because the Albert Aston Martin, after its little moment on cold tyres at the start, has now started to come into its own and has closed in on Jamie Sturgis in the VW Golf TCR. And Jamie Sturgis was a second ahead at the start of the lap, but to my untrained eye, that is not a second anymore as they go through Coppice Corner. So the Aston Martin GT4 car is reeling in the TCR car. I've heard people say before, though, that TCR cars, well-prepared and well-driven TCR cars anyway, are pretty similar in pace to some GT4 machinery. And, of course, that is the older-shaped Aston Martin Vantage GT4 now. So a few years old, probably about 4 or 5 years old, that particular example. And the Alberts are hoping that they can get themselves one further step up the podium. On the previous lap, the Aston Martin was 2 tenths quicker. Tries to have a goal on the inside there at Redgate, but was just a car length or so too far back. Now, 4th place is still the same order as ever it was, but Gary Wardle is a bit closer now to the Can & Wilson Aston Martin. And is he going to have a go into Redgate out the window? I'm watching him, and yes, he's gone through. We've cut away on the screen, quite rightly, to the fight for 2nd place. But at the top of the hill, there's going to be a change for 4th. It is now going to be the fluorescent Porsche ahead. So Gary Wardle is now free to try and chase down the 3 cars ahead of him. I'll be interested to see what his pace is now, because for the first time this race, the Porsche is in clean air. So So Wardle then into 4th, that means the Aston Martin's down to 5th, and now it's the turn of Bird to challenge for the class lead. So this is a battle for the lead of the class now between the Aston Martin and the Porsche. As Jamie Sturgis here continues to try and fend off the Albert Aston Martin. We've got 4 different classes actually represented inside the top 5 in this race. The leading car, Jenkins, is a GT3 class car. Then you've got the open class car of Sturgis. One of the Alberts in. The Alberts actually aren't designated as having a class that they belong to, but I would imagine, well, it's not going to be a GT3 class car, is it? It probably should be in the open class, actually, similar to the TCR car. Definitely performance-wise, there are some similarities you can see because he's struggling to get past the VW. Jamie Sturgis keeps the position through Redgate Corner, despite the fact the Aston Martin was maybe a little quicker in a straight line. I don't think there was a huge straight line speed difference between the two. Now they've got some traffic to deal with in the shape of Lawrence Squire's BMW. And Jamie Sturgis sort of half-heartedly looks up the inside, wasn't sure whether Lawrence was going to leave him room. He did, but Sturgis was a lot slower through the corner, and this is Albert's chance now. He gets a run out of the old hairpin through Starkeys, tries to get past the Golf. The Aston Martin actually hidden completely behind the surprisingly large VW Golf silhouette. And they work their way now up through that right-hander at McLean's corner with still the Golf in front. This is developing now into quite a nice battle. So Albert then trying to size up his opposition here, trying to figure out where he's going to be able to make this overtake. As these two go down into the chicane, by the way, the race leader, Nigel Jenkins, is already at Redgate, just to give you a sort of visual idea of what that gap is. He's just got past, though, I think. That was the Edward Lee BMW, was it not? It looked like the Edward Lee BMW. No, he's still off the track, so another one of the BMWs that he just negotiated. Second place battle, though, is on again, and this time Albert sails around the outside of Jamie Sturgis. That was a good move, and he got the car stopped as well. So having tried the inside line a couple of times, Albert decided the outside maybe was the better way to go, and he does pick up second position. And look, already starting to gap the VW now. I said I was going to look at Gary Wardle's pace compared to these two, and, well, he's comparable to them. On the previous lap, Sturgis did a 17.3, Albert a 17.1, and Wardle a 17.2. So there you can see Wardle's not really actually getting away that much from the Cannon Wilson Aston Martin. Bird is still stuck behind the Aston Martin, so no change for the class lead there. And then the Lotus of Peter Jackson, depending on which part of the circuit you look at it, sometimes it's very close behind those two, and then sometimes in the second half of the lap in particular, it falls away a little bit. As Nigel Jenkins in the Ferrari 458 comes across the start-finish line. We have a mandatory pit stop, remember, in this race, a bit like we had for the previous Aston Martin Owners Club race. So even if you're not changing driver, you still have to pit to make sure that you don't gain an advantage over those that are sharing the car, even though it probably is still an advantage, in all honesty, to be flying solo. And I think possibly Jamie Sturgis has chosen now to pit. Yes, he has. So Jamie Sturgis has just pitted. You can see on the timing tower his name faded out, meaning that he is in the pit lane for his regulation pit stop. And the timing of these pit stops not quite so important now, because there are only 11 cars still running with the demise of Edward Lee and the Porsche of Alexander. There you can see Sturgis and so too Peter Jackson. Now Jackson did choose to pit because I think he was getting held up by the two cars immediately ahead of him. And I think the trouble with that Lotus is because it's so quick through the corners, it was almost running into the back of the Nissan and having to really bail out. So the thought here, I guess, for Peter Jackson is that he can get out of the pit lane into some clean air and put in some really quick lap times and maybe leapfrog ahead of those that haven't yet stopped. So two cars in, both of them from within the top, well, 7 in the race, but Jackson had been running in the top 5 earlier on. You can see exactly what a TCR VW Golf looks like. Proper bit of kit is a TCR car. And out onto the circuit it goes again. Of course, it leaves the pit lane considerably before Peter Jackson's Lotus, because it came in quite a long way before. The gap between the two of them was something in the region of 20 seconds. So Sturgis rejoins the circuit, and Peter Jackson will do likewise very shortly. Now, Sturgis has gone back on track. into some nice clean air. Peter Jackson, I'm not convinced is though. He's actually, Peter Jackson's so frustrating this for him. He's going to rejoin the track pretty much exactly where he was before he pitted. He's maybe going to be a bit further behind the Nissan than he was. Let's see if we can hold this shot, because there goes Gary Wardle in the Porsche. There is the Aston Martin of Can and Wilson just behind, we might see. And then it will be the Bird Nissan. And then the next car in line again, once again, is Peter Jackson. So Jackson, he tried to get out of dirty air and into some clean air. Didn't really succeed in doing so. We've got the Porsche in as well of Rob Hollyman, as there is the Albert Aston Martin. Now, do they react to Sturgis pulling the pin early here and pitting early? Do they leave the Albert car out a bit longer? Of course, the difference being Sturgis is not doing a driver change, whereas the Alberts are. So if they decide they've got their quicker Albert in for this first stint, then they might choose to leave them out a bit longer. There is Hollyman, 564. There, the Aston Martin. I said it was a 21st century race, this, but not entirely, of course. You do still have a couple racing in the lower classes that are in significantly older machines, the Aston Martin DB4, which runs in the GT4 category, and I think that's a little unrealistic, quite frankly, because although it may have been a GT4 equivalent back in the day, it certainly can't compete with that car, which is a modern day GT4 car. I mean, look at that, quite literally in a different league, aren't they? So through goes Albert then in second position, putting a lap on the Aston Martin. Aston Martin lapping Aston Martin, with several decades between those two cars, of course. The race leader, by the way, has just been in. Nigel Jenkins in the Ferrari has been in and out very quickly, that seemed, actually, and so too is the Can and Wilson Aston Martin. They're doing a driver change, so that means that the Alberts, are they going to get the lead? Yes, I think they are. I think they're going to be a lap ahead of Nigel Jenkins, more or less, after his pit stop, although others have been losing only just over a lap. Yeah, I suppose that would be right, wouldn't it? So I think Albert has taken the lead, then Jenkins a lap down in second, but only because he's pitted. And the leading Aston Martin hasn't. The older Aston Martin comes in, and the DB4 makes its mandatory stop. There's Gary Wardle, still in third position, and getting away a bit now from Bird in the Nissan, who now comes through. There you can see the Can and Wilson V8 Vantage coming through. Almost looks a bit lopsided, that, doesn't it? Like the right-hand side is a bit lower than the left, but hopefully nothing too much to be concerned about. Turns through the first corner and makes its way, thunders its way back down through the Crane curves. So approaching half race distance then, 22.5 minutes still to go in this one, and the lead gap, which is a bit academic at the moment because we're still waiting for the top 3 cars to pit, is 29 seconds or so between Albert in the Aston Martin and Wardle in the Porsche. There is the car that should reclaim the lead once all of this is said and done. That is the Nigel Jenkins Ferrari, which turns its way through Redgate Corner and actually isn't racing away from the Albert Aston Martin here. It came out of the pit lane about this sort of distance apart a lap ago, and it's not really lapping all that much quicker, and it's certainly going to lose time now because of the BMW of Lawrence Squires in front, which didn't exactly leap out of the way down the old hairpin. So the Ferrari, holding on to the lead of the race, then makes its way up to McLean's corner. We're in that middle phase of the race now then, where the half the field pitted, a few of them haven't, so the actual order out there on track is a little bit up in the air at the moment. We know that the Ferrari of Jenkins should reclaim the lead. The big question really is going to be whether or not Jamie Sturgis comes out with second place, or whether it ends up being the Albert Aston Martin. The Alberts are doing 1 minute 13s, mid 1 minute 13s fairly consistently, and there is the Aston Martin, whereas Jamie Sturgis is in the low 1 minute 15s. So I don't think Sturgis is going to be able to do enough, even with that early pit stop, because they're not changing tyres or anything. It's not like you really get a huge advantage from pitting early, and so the VW Golf, I think, is probably going to stay in third place. So there goes Nigel Jenkins down through the Crane curve. Scott Woodwiss is back with me again here in the commentary box, and another eclectic mix of cars out there for us to enjoy.
Yeah, it's brilliant to see so many different variety of contemporary machinery, because we had, of course, the Aston Martin Owners Club with the classic variety with Jack Fairman Cup and Innis Island Cup and some great machines in that. But we get to see some more modern cars in the mix as an alternative for this combined race, which is good. And a nice mixture of marques and models in the mix. One car which I'm very intrigued by is the Charles Hyde Andrews Bird car, which is just coming to pit lane now. And that car, for those who know touring car circles will recognise the livery. I certainly do. It's from one of my favourite touring cars from my childhood. It's the same livery as that you'd find on the R32 Nissan Skyline GTR that competed in the Australian Touring Car Championship back in 1990. So not just the R32, but also the R31 model, which competed before it. So nice inspiration of livery there from Charles Hyde Andrews Bird. Nigel Jenkins, though, looks though when the Alberts pit, it looks though he's certainly on the pace to try and get his lap back, because he's just done a new fastest lap of the race, 1:12.313, and that's a second and a half better than the current race leader, the Alberts in their Aston Martin Vantage GT4 in the mix. There's Peter Jackson, and I guess that must be the 20 now of the aforementioned Wilson at the wheel now of the older V8 Vantage. These two battling now for position. This is for overall position rather than class positions, because the Jackson Lotus is in the invitation class, and Class D is the one which the Cannon Wilson Aston Martin is. It thunders past the little Lotus Elise. It's a bit of a lock-up as it turns in, and his Jackson got surprised at just exactly where Wilson stopped the car on the apex, and almost had to really anchor up mid-corner, which really got him sideways as he comes down the pit straight. And Wilson now continuing on. That's put him up to 6th place overall, still second in the Class D, because that is now the mix between the Birds. Now the other driver in the mix, who is just called Bird, is now heading back out once again in the Nissan. And also we've had the pit stop for the BMW number 17 of Johnson. That's the 17 BMW Matthew Johnson and his BMW M3 E36. So there is car still running in 6th position. I think anyone who knows fans of James Bond will remember that car from the infamous Scene in the Snow, I think, or on the ice, I think, with that, I can't remember the exact Bond film, but that model, that sort of generation of Aston Martin has appeared on a Bond screen at least once. There we see the Gary Wardle Porsche 911 GT3, which is currently sat in second in the GT3 class, behind the Nigel Jenkins Ferrari, which is, as we say, currently at the moment in 2nd place, but we are still awaiting the only pit caller left, which is the Alberts in their Aston Martin. And they continue to lead. They have a lap over the Nigel Jenkins Ferrari, but I suspect, seeing as a pit stop, I think it's about 90 seconds for a pit stop, and the gap is about a lap, and a lap being about roughly 1:12, 1:13, and that will mean that the lead should easily go back to Nigel Jenkins. The question's got to be, though, is where exactly will the Alberts bring their Aston Martin back out? Now, if it's going to be 2nd place, whoops, that's the DB4 that's had the spin. That's Ed O'Byrne in the GT4 class, number 88 Aston Martin. Another spin. That was on the exit of Coppice. As we see Gary Wardle here just ahead of the Wilson Aston Martin. Now that Ricky Can has relinquished driving duties for the remainder of the race. There's the Peter Jackson Lotus Elise, which has markings on it that suggests it's a car that's regularly competed in GT Cup in the past. And whether we'll see it out in GT Cup, I guess, remains to be seen throughout 2021. So still got 17 minutes left in this GT4 Challenge Intermarque's combined race for the Aston Martin Owners Club. Fantastic addition to the BRSCC. It's nice to have a nice mixture of some high-performance modern racing cars with some superb and beautiful classic cars racing, and nice to have them both on the same timetable. So a big thank you to AMOC and to Peter Snowden and everyone involved in the AMOC club to bring the racing operations in terms of the responsibility to run their races to the BRSCC. And I know that everyone at the club has been excited to have them under their wing and hold their first races. As Gary Wardle tries to squeeze up the inside, and that really didn't work. The BMW didn't see him, and Wilson has to really anchor up to make sure he doesn't make contact. And Gary Wardle is very lucky to just keep the car out of the gravel. So Gary Wardle then facing sideways at Redgate. Past him goes the Peter Jackson Lotus. Also past him goes the Nigel Sturgis Ferrari. So Nigel Jenkins Ferrari, forgive me. And either Wardle stalled the car, or we're simply just waiting for a gap, because there are still more cars coming through. The Alberts in Aston Martin have gone past. There goes the Bird and Hyde Andrews Bird Nissan. The Porsche of, that's car number 9, that's the Porsche 964 of Rob Holliman also going through. And Wardle's car is still stationary, so either he stalled it and just can't get it refired, or there's a further issue which caused him to spin, but it all seemed to be the fact that he was trying to simply put a lap on the 55 Porsche. He has got it going now, which is good, so maybe it took him a moment just to get the car restarted, but Lawrence Squires was the BMW which he was trying to lap, and I think Lawrence Squires probably didn't realise that Gary was trying to move alongside as quickly as he did, and it forced the Porsche to just really stand on the brakes and bring the rear end around. So he's just coasting around, possibly to the pits to have a look and see if there's any lasting damage. The Jamie Sturgis VW Golf TCR has moved past, and that still remains in third position. The pit window is still open, so it looks as though the Alberts are going right to the edge of the pit window before they make their stop. In fact, as I say that, just out of my window, they are heading into the pit lane now. So the current race leaders, the Alberts and their Aston Martin, are the last pit callers to make their stop. And we can see them on camera here as one Albert brings the car to a stop, and the other one will jump in. So just see the pit stop happening here. So driver will jump out, one Albert in, one Albert out, which is pretty simple. You can see that's liveried up because it looks as though, it looks as though it's done the opening rounds of, I'm guessing, Brit Car Endurance, at least at Silverstone. If not possibly, it may have been racing yesterday at Snetterton as well, because it has got all the Brit Car decals on it as well. So that's obviously a regular car that's competed in that championship. Certainly getting their weekend's worth of racing. That's even Tom to the windscreen as well. Look at that. Triple M squad seems to be well rehearsed in pit stops. And of course what they should now do is we're now waiting for Nigel Jenkins to come through in the Ferrari. And here he comes out of the final chicane, and he will retake the lead just as the doors close and the Ferrari's about to go through. And that's Gary Wardle in the Porsche, and unfortunately after the spin, obviously something mechanical has been damaged as a result. There wasn't any contact with the number 55 BMW, but it looks as though whatever he's done seems to have wrecked something mechanically, which does mean that there's possible damage. He's having a conversation with one of his mechanics, and whether they're going to push it backwards and get him back out into the race or push it forwards into the garage, we'll have to wait and see. But the Alberts back out on the circuit, and I don't think they've lost anything more than the lead. So they've gone back out, I think, in second place. And as Andy was saying, Jamie Sturgis wasn't quite on the same pace as the Aston Martin when they were both out on track before Albert made its pit stop. The mechanics for the Gary Wardle Porsche are still talking to Gary and just him relaying some of the issues. Just to confirm, Jamie Sturgis is still in third place because the white Golf TCR has just gone flying past the pits, past the commentary box. So third place for him. So now the pit stops have shaken out. Now, of course, Gary Wardle will start tumbling down the timing stream because he's in the pit lane. Got two Astons here together, Ed O'Byrne and the 20 car of Cannon Wilson. And Wilson at the wheel, and he goes thundering past. Two beautiful sounds, the throaty V8 of the newer V8 Vantage and the beautiful sort of old school classic car, proper classic sports car sound of the Aston Martin DB4. Two same marks, but two very different sounding engines. They both sound beautiful in their own right. But at the moment, it's an equally beautiful sounding Ferrari 458 Challenge that is leading the way pretty convincingly by a lap in the hands of Nigel Jenkins. And the second of the Alberts now in the car for the number 38 Aston Martin. 26.1 seconds is the gap. So we'll have to wait and see if this Albert behind the wheel is any quicker than the first one that has just relinquished the car in that late pit stop. Just seeing here, Nigel Jenkins putting a lap on the number 20 Cannon Wilson V8 Vantage. Wilson dutifully moves aside, respects the blue flags, and lets the bright yellow, almost gold Ferrari 458 Challenge through. 11 and 3/4 minutes left to go in this first race of the season for the combined grid for the Aston Martin Owners Club GT Challenge, GT4 Challenge and Intermarque. It's been a pretty dominant performance so far from Nigel Jenkins. He's still got a few more laps to go to confirm his potential race victory. And is that the Wilson Aston Martin incoming to the pit lane? Yes, it is. So that's not a scheduled stop. So unfortunately, I think there might be problems for the Gulf liveried, or Gulf coloured Aston Martin V8 Vantage. It makes a stop just as seeing the pit lane here. And the driver's door opens just to kind of get a handle on what the issue might be. And they're going to the bottom of the car. Are they possibly looking at something on the... Was that something that took off the bottom of the splitter? Something that was hanging off, maybe? Maybe. Just in the foreground, I think that's Gary Wardle pushing his Porsche away. But the Aston Martin back out. Now, I don't know if that was simply just a piece of bodywork or something that was caught. But whatever the drama was, seems to have been solved pretty quickly. and the Aston Martin heads back out onto the circuit, just behind the car that caused, well, was involved in the drama which caused the unfortunate demise of the Gary Wardle Porsche, which you saw there just as the Aston Martin was heading out of the pit lane. In the background, the number 27 car was being pushed back into its box. So sadly, its race is done early with about roughly 10 minutes to go. So let's just run down where we are position-wise. Then Nigel Jenkins leads the way overall in the GT3 class. And it's 20 minutes comes past the pit lane, past me now in the commentary box. He leads there, has completed 22 laps with the completion of the one just done a couple of seconds ago. Second is the Alberts, number 38, Aston Martin Vantage GT4. Third place for Jamie Sturgis in the open class VW Golf TCR. Fourth place for, well, it's now Peter Jackson, of course, because the Cann and Wilson Aston Martin pitted from fourth place to fix whatever issue that was at the front of the car. Peter Jackson's Lotus has now gone up into fourth overall and his top invitation class car, the only invitation class car on the field. Fifth place for the Bird and Hyde Andrew Bird Nissan 200 SX, or as it's known in other parts of the world, a Silvia, S14 Silvia. And that's in fifth position now. In fact, the Cann and Wilson car, because of its issue, had to really, it was there for quite a while, so it dropped several spots, and it's still going. But I wonder maybe if it's either back at full pace now, or whether it's possibly still carrying one or two issues from which are still existing despite the quick pit call to try and fix whatever the problem was, or at least diagnose the problem and see if he can drive around it. Jamie Sturgis then puts a lap on that Aston Martin. There is the ever-present 55 BMW of Lawrence Squires. Still 8 3/4 minutes to go in this race, and seems to be fairly settled throughout most of this race in terms of the gaps have just been sort of extending and contracting quite a lot in the mix before, during and after the pit stops. And just to confirm then, the number 9 Porsche of Rob Holloman is now into 6th position after the pit call for the unscheduled pit call for the Cann and Wilson Aston Martin, which is down to 7th. The number 17 car of Matthew Johnson, that's the other BMW E6M3, which there are 2 in the field. The other BMW 318 is just a more regular 318, rather than the other 2, which are more the more touring car livery-esque looking machines. The Ed Squires BMW is actually, sorry, Lawrence Squires BMW is actually currently in 9th place overall at the moment, which is interesting, and it also leads its class. It's the only car in Class B. Then we have Ed O'Byrne in the Aston Martin DB4, and of course we've lost, of course, Gary Wardle's Porsche after the spin at Redgate Corner when it was trying to lap the 55 BMW. And of course then we lost the other cars earlier on, which was the 170, which was the Edward Lee BMW M3, and number 22, the Alexander Porsche, which effectively, unfortunately, never even really got started in that race. It simply just had some issues on the formation lap and didn't even really properly get going.
Yes, indeed. So plenty going on through the middle portion of this race. I just spotted the Cann and Wilson Aston Martin had come back into the pit lane this time to retire. So I gather they've had some mechanical issues whilst I was away for the last 10 minutes. So that's a shame. Car that was running solidly earlier on. Yeah,
to be honest, because once you were away from the microphone, I was sort of describing it on the stream, and it was rather odd. It wasn't. Actually, that's not good. There's another one that might be in strife. That's the Peter Jackson Lotus. That was the car that it first immediately benefited from the Cann and Wilson car coming into the pit lane with its issue. And I wonder if that's issue of its own now for Peter Jackson and the Lotus Elise. And that's also coming. That definitely isn't scheduled because everyone has made their scheduled stops during the pit window. And the mechanic gets in, pokes his head in. What's the problem, bud? And all is not well with that Lotus, so there's one or two cars that are starting to feel the effects of this 40-minute race, but one car that certainly isn't is this man, Nigel Jenkins, in that beautiful-looking, almost gold Ferrari 458 Challenge car, and it seems to be running fairly, he says touch wood, fairly flawlessly at the moment in the lead of the race. Of course, a lap ahead of the Alberts after they were the last cars to make their pit stop. They were right at the end of the pit window, and of course there wasn't a big enough advantage for them to be able to hold on to the lead, but they have held on to 2nd place because Jamie Sturgis, as you rightly pointed out earlier on, wasn't exactly on the same pace as the Alberts, and so therefore it meant that the TCR car had to settle for 3rd place at the moment, which is on screen now. I'm impressed though by the Bird and Hyde Andrews Bird Nissan, which is up to 4th place and holding its own. And we saw that in the early stages that it had the pace to keep up with a Porsche GT3 car, a Lotus, and an old school Aston Martin. So what they've done to that Nissan certainly seems to be working a treat, because it's certainly quite a car that is doing quite a bit. And I think that car's even made some appearances, if not in these kind of races, in the Classic Sports Car Club and in AMOC racing. I'm sure I've even seen it competing at times in the what's considered, I think, the Castle GT Championship a few times as well. So they get around with that car, and they like to race it wherever they can in these kind of all-comer style GT sort of sports car type races. So it's good to see it getting some use. And I did also point out that that car is it sports another. You talk about in the modified Fords, there was a Australian touring car livery colours, and this car sports another Australian touring car livery, which is the 1990 Nissan Gibson Motorsport livery for when it ran in the Australian Touring Car Championship. I think both the R31 and the R32 ran that car, and that's my favourite year of touring car racing from Australia because of the Nissan and everything else that raced in that era. So nice livery, and it goes as quick as it looks.
Yeah, it was attracting a lot of attention. I noticed on the YouTube chat earlier on as well. It's an awesome looking car, and it's got some serious performance as well, like the Ferrari really that's dominating this race. As we watched that on the screen, I've just noticed out of the window that Peter Jackson is back in the race, but I don't think he'll be in it for long because the Lotus was stuttering its way along the start-finish line. Almost like it's a gear issue, maybe, like it couldn't get it in or out of gear. So possibly a gearbox problem for the Lotus. Whatever it is, I think it's going to struggle around one more lap and then probably bail for the pit lane. So Jenkins leads then by nearly a minute. 52.8 seconds is the margin between Jenkins and Albert in the Aston Martin in second place. And now Albert is 7.6 seconds ahead of Jamie Sturgis. When I last checked a couple of laps ago, that gap was over 10 seconds, so I don't know whether Albert's just sort of stroking it home now, but he was 2.3 seconds slower than Sturgis on the previous lap. The race leader comes across the line to complete one more lap. In fourth place is the Nissan. Hollyman in the Porsche 964 is in fifth position, with Peter Jackson still sixth despite that pit stop. But like I say, I'm pretty sure he'll be back in the pit shortly.
Yellow flag, and that's the Jackson Lotus that you mentioned, which you rightfully, unfortunately, but rightfully predicted hasn't got much further than the pit lane. So it's pulled off just at the top of Hollywood before the Craner curves, and another car that's come to a rather unfortunate premature end.
Yes, I did notice as it left Redgate that last lap that it was crawling and seemed to be slowing to even more of a crawl as it went behind the trees. So yeah, Peter has realised he's not going to get it back round, or if he did try and get it back round to the pits, he could do more damage to it than he would just by parking it. So yeah, sensible decision there. Unfortunate though, because it means we've lost another car now from the race. Jamie Sturgis though continuing to press on. Now the Albert Aston Martin crosses the line now, does 118 this time, even slower. Sturgis could get back to the Alberts here because he comes through and does another 115. So it's an 18.7 for Albert, a 15.4 for Sturgis. So that's 3.3 seconds quicker than the Aston Martin. If he does another lap like that, he could actually be on them within the next lap or so.
He really could. And you were talking about earlier on the fact that TCR cars, when set up and driven well, they can be as quick as GT4 machinery, and it looks that Jamie's certainly out to prove that point. And that's a car that's also quite a regular in certain series up and down in, again, Classic Sports Car Club, Castle GTs. It's quite a regular as well. I know it's been competing recently in the Slick series that the CSGC runs as well, of course, and that's quite a long way from race one. So Jamie Sturgis certainly races the car where he can. I know, obviously, being the man behind the voice of TCR as well, it'd be quite nice to see him possibly have a go in TCR with that car as well. But I suspect at the same time that's not a standard TCR car. They probably had a bit of fettling under the bonnet with that particular power.
I'm not sure. I believe it is running to full TCR spec, I think, because I know Jamie Peters-Ennis, who was with us yesterday, is good friends with Jamie and actually helps Jamie run it when he goes out and races in some series, particularly down at Castle Combe. And I think he did tell me that it is a Pucker TCR car, and could, if Jamie wanted to, go and race in TCR UK or indeed any TCR competition around the world. That's the joy of the TCR class. One of the other joys is that, as we've said, the car is very quick. Not to take anything away from Jamie here, though, but I do think that Albert is running into some sort of an issue here, because the lap times are some 3, nearly 4 seconds off the pace it was running earlier on, and Jamie is all over the back now of the Aston Martin. So this is for second place overall. Now he's done the catching. Where does he do the overtaking? Because even if he is running into problems here, Albert's not for leaving the door open, is he? Runs a bit wide out of the old hairpin, though. Jamie Sturgis pulls alongside, and now we get a real graphic look at what the performance difference is between the cars. The Aston Martin just a little bit quicker in a straight line, but not a huge amount. And Jamie Sturgis is on the brakes again, tries to get up the inside. Albert seems to be struggling to keep it online, so maybe a brake or tyre issue for the Aston Martin. Whatever it is, he's really struggling through the corners up at the top end of the circuit, and Jamie Sturgis is all over him. The Aston Martin almost off the track, and that's all the invitation that Jamie needed. He dives through on the inside and does now move back into second place.
And you could tell when he was trying to get past Albert early on a few corners back, the fact that Albert was defending so hard, he actually had to stand on the brakes through Starkey, which is supposed to be a flat-out corner. So that's just how much of a defensive effort Albert tried to put up. But I do have to agree that there's possibly some kind of issue with that number 30 Aston Martin, or at least it's not quite at the same sort of pace. I think what would have frustrated Jamie if he didn't get past him just then is that the fact that obviously the GT4 has a horsepower advantage, therefore if at any point he's weak in the corners, if he does try to pull alongside, the Alberts can simply just floor the throttle and pull away a little bit on the straight. So it's certainly quite a relief for Jamie to be able to get that move done. But speaking of getting things done, Nigel Jenkins is about to get this race done, of course, here in the second AMOC race of the day. We've been here before with the 55 BMW. I know you weren't here for it, but the Gary Wardle time, it started when he was trying to lap the 55 BMW. Not the 55 BMW's fault, but simply just I think Gary Wardle went to go and make a move up the inside to lap him, didn't realise that the 55 car was going to hold his racing line how he did, anchored up and had a spin and just about kicked the rear wheels out of the gravel. But whatever the reason was, it must have damaged something mechanically, because it took him a while to get it restarted, and then he brought it straight into the pit lane, and after a couple of minutes of discussion pushed it into the box. So that car's been part of lots of events today, I think, possibly including maybe seeing one last lap being put on it by the leader, who has pretty much been, the word dominant gets thrown around too much, but of course given the fact he's obviously a different class to everyone else that side, he's been pretty strong all round, and that you can't really argue with the Ferrari at the front of the field. And he's right now going to take the first victory of the season, which is going to be pretty incredible. So superb stuff from Nigel, and well deserved.
Yep, comes out of the final chicane, sees the checkered flag and wins the Aston Martin Owners Club GT, GT4 and Intermarque Series race here from Donington Park. He didn't quite put a lap, or another lap, on the Sturgis and Albert battle. In fact, no, that would have been the first lap that he would have put on them, but he didn't get there. So we will have 3 cars on the lead lap by the end of the race. Through comes the BMW a bit further back. That's the Johnson BMW, isn't it? Number 17, which takes the checkered flag in 6th position. And actually, the last couple of cars to come through will be the 2nd and 3rd place cars overall. Jamie Sturgis and the Albert Aston Martin. Mark and Dale Albert sharing the car. Not sure which one finished ahead, or which one was in for the first stint and which one was in for the second stint. But anyway, they were pretty consistent throughout the race. So the Aston Martin will end up 3rd. Jamie Sturgis should be 2nd, just waiting for them to come through, because it wouldn't be the last time that it wouldn't be the first time that positions that looked fairly settled going on to the last lap here this weekend actually end up changing before the flag. Here comes the Bird Nissan, and there is Jamie Sturgis just behind, with the Albert Aston Martin a long way back. So Jamie Sturgis will finish 2nd in the VW Golf TCR, and the Aston Martin of Mark and Dale Albert will come home in 3rd place overall. So, entertaining race that, actually. There may not have been that many cars to start, and then only, I think, 8 of them running at the end, but good racing, lots going on, and Jamie Sturgis there with his late challenge against the Alberts. Really surprising us all there with his pace to take 2nd position away. So that is our final Aston Martin Owners Club race of the day. We thank the Aston Martin Owners Club for joining us here on this BRSCC race event, and looking forward to more racing from them. If you want more information on the Aston Martin Owners Club, do head to their website, where you can find information on how to enter the races perhaps. They've got multiple different classes. You don't obviously have to have an Aston Martin to race with them. They've got multiple classes of cars, so yeah, if you fancy going and racing with the Aston Martin Owners Club, do give their website a check, and keep an eye out for future race events as well. Here then is the result. It's Nigel Jenkins that wins, Jamie Sturgis 2nd, and the Albert Aston Martin should be 3rd, but for some reason doesn't appear on that result sheet. Then it's the Bird Nissan that was 4th, Robert Holliman was 5th, 6th place then for Johnson's, 7th for Squires, 8th for O'Byrne, Edward O'Byrne in the Aston Martin DB4, and then a whole list of retirements. Unfortunately, Jackson, the Cannon Wilson Aston Martin, Gary Wardle in the Porsche, Edward Lee in the BMW was a non-starter, and so sadly was James Alexander in the Porsche 968. So 3 more races to go. Don't go anywhere because these 3 should all be really very exciting. We've got the Avon Tyres National Formula 4 Championship about to go out. They've already had 2 really entertaining races this weekend. The 3rd race will be coming up very shortly. That's a 15-minute race. Also for 15 minutes is the Ford Modified Series, which had, again, a very entertaining race earlier on today. Big grid of modified blue ovals heading out onto the circuit at about 6:05. If we're on time, which I think we are, we're maybe even 5 minutes ahead of time, then the Nankang Tyre BRSCC City Car Cup will round out the weekend's action, and their first race went about as well as anyone could have hoped, so we're hoping for more of the same in race number 2. So Nigel Jenkins then is parked down below me, and I believe already having made his way downstairs to chat with our race winner is Scott Woodwiss.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, Andy. Of course, we've got the top 3 overall here, so we'll be able to have a chat to both Nigel Jenkins, Jamie Sturgis and the Alberts. So we'll have a chat. We'll first of all see if we can get a word with our overall race winner when he jumps out of the car and see what he thought of that one. Of course, Nigel Jenkins and his Ferrari clambers out, and we'll have a word with him. It feels human again. Nigel, fantastic drive in a fantastic car, of course.
Yes, good car.
How was that for you?
Yeah, I was coming up to the start. I could see a couple of cars were coming close, and I managed to get away into the first corner. And from there on, to be honest, it was okay. I had a couple of moments, trying to overtake back markers. They were all really polite. It was great. But the car's fabulous. I mean, Richard and the team at R&R have done a brilliant job of setting the car up. So yeah, I'm pretty proud and pleased to be able to drive it.
And when are you next out in the Ferrari?
I've got no idea. The way I feel right now, I need a bath, shower, a couple of days to relax.
Probably a beer or 2 as well.
Yeah, when I get home. I can't drink and drive. I come from Sussex, so long way to go back home.
Well, enjoy it. We'll let you get your trophy in a second, but well done. I hope we'll see you at some point with AMOC soon.
I'll be back again with AMOC. Thank you.
Fantastic, good stuff. Right, let's move down here a second then. We've got 2nd and 3rd place. Jamie Sturgis here in the Golf. He's just having a quick fist bump here with the Albert, so we'll see if we can possibly grab him down here to have a word. We've got the Formula Fords on the grid at the moment, so see if we can grab him for a second. I don't want to shout on the mic because we can see if we can catch his attention, but certainly enjoying some of the conversation with the Alberts, so we'll hopefully get them in a second. Now he's going to bring him over here to have a chat.
I've got a mask on.
You're okay with the mask on. So Jamie, obviously entertaining race for you. Obviously great battle at the end with the Aston Martin. That looked like good fun out there.
It was, yeah. I obviously racing with the Aston at the start. I think for a split second I might have been leading in front of the Ferrari. I think Nigel might have been asleep at the start and got the jump, and then I'd been worried about the rear-wheel drive cars getting past me. It's quite a long run down to the first corner here, but obviously managed to keep them behind. They managed to keep the Aston behind me for quite a few laps. Then as soon as he got through, it was sort of the pit window opened, and I knew that thinking about him and thinking about him behind and thinking about him in front was slowing me down. So I pitted, and the plan was always come out in free air and then just circulate as quick as I could without any other cars and see if I could jump it in the pit stops. And so, yeah, we were quite close when by the time he'd rolled out of their pit stops, and the guys from Zest on the pit wall for me were telling me I had about 10 or 11 seconds, and I could see him in the distance, and it just kind of spurred me on. But yeah, great fun race. It was just superb here, and yeah, great event the guys have managed to put on as well.
Fantastic. We'll have to leave it there because of short time, but well done for 2nd place. Good stuff. We're going to very quickly grab one of the Alberts for 3rd place. So have a chat with either, is it John or Dale? So have a quick Mark. Sorry, Mark. Let's have a chat with Dale actually quickly. 3rd place for you guys. Looked like fun out there, especially battling with the TCR. How did you find it?
Yeah, no, it was brilliant. To be fair, it was nice. We've had a few issues with the car, a couple of gremlins recently. We unfortunately couldn't make Brick Car yesterday. We was meant to be at Snetterton. But we managed to sort the car out in time to come here, and yeah, a bit of lad and dad racing, and yeah, I love every minute of it with him.
And Mark, it's quite a bit of kit, the GT4. How do you find driving it?
Yeah, like you say, quite a bit of kit really. Yeah, front engine. I'm used to rear engine Porsches, so a bit different. Trying to get used to the car. It's our first season. Thoroughly enjoying it with my son. Just doing a bit of lad and dad racing. Yeah, great.